The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, a silent void punctuated only by the faint hum of machinery and the occasional flicker of distant stars. Dr. Evelyn Carter sat alone in the dimly lit control room of the International Space Research Institute, her eyes fixed on the glowing screens before her. The data streaming in from the deep space satellite was routine, a monotonous cascade of numbers and waveforms that she had analyzed countless times before. But tonight something was different. A faint, almost imperceptible anomaly had caught her attention. A blip in the data that defied explanation. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up the raw signal for closer inspection. The waveform was irregular, jagged, and unlike anything she had ever seen. It pulsed with a strange rhythm, as if it were alive, breathing in the cold emptiness of space. Evelyn leaned forward, her heart pounding in her chest. This was no natural phenomenon. The signal had structure, a pattern that suggested intelligence. She felt a shiver run down her spine as the implications began to sink in. Could this be it? The moment she had spent her entire career waiting for? She reached for her phone, her hands trembling slightly as she dialed a familiar number. The phone rang twice before a gruff, elderly voice answered. "Whitaker!" the voice said, tinged with the weariness of someone who had been pulled from sleep. "Professor, it's Evelyn," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need you to come to the lab, right now." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of shuffling. "Evelyn, do you have any idea what time it is?" Professor James Whitaker grumbled, though there was a hint of curiosity in his tone. "I know, and I wouldn't call if it weren't important," she replied, her voice steadying. I think I've found something. Something big." There was another pause, longer this time. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Whitaker said finally, his voice now alert and tinged with excitement. Evelyn hung up and turned back to the screen, her mind racing. She began running every diagnostic she could think of, ruling out equipment malfunctions, solar interference, and any other possible explanations. But the signal remained, stubborn and enigmatic, taunting her with its mystery. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a thrill she hadn't felt since her early days as a researcher. This was what she lived for, the pursuit of the unknown, the chance to uncover secrets hidden in the cosmos. By the time Professor Whitaker arrived, disheveled but wide awake, Evelyn had already compiled a preliminary analysis. She handed him a printout of the waveform, her hands still trembling with excitement. "Look at this," she said, her voice low and urgent. "It's not random. There's a pattern here, a sequence that repeats every 47 seconds. And the frequency, it's unlike anything we've ever recorded." Whitaker adjusted his glasses and studied the printout, his brow furrowing as he traced the jagged lines with his finger. "You're right," he murmured after a moment. "This isn't natural, it's deliberate." He looked up at Evelyn, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Do you realize what this could mean?" Evelyn nodded, her throat dry. "It could be a signal from them." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. For decades, humanity had searched the stars for signs of intelligent life, sending out messages and listening for replies. But the silence had been deafening, a reminder of how small and alone they truly were. Until now. Whitaker set the printout down and turned to the computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he pulled up the raw data. "We need to decode this," he said, his voice filled with determination. "If there's a message here, we need to find it." Evelyn nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. She reached for her phone again, this time dialing the number of Lieutenant Mark Harris, a young communications officer stationed at the Deep Space Monitoring Facility. Harris was one of the best in his field, with a knack for deciphering complex signals. If anyone could help them unravel this mystery, it was him. The phone rang once before Harris answered, his voice crisp and professional. "Harris here?" "Mark, it's Evelyn," she said, her voice urgent. "I need you to come to the lab. We've picked up something unusual." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Unusual how?" Harris asked, his tone now tinged with curiosity. "We're not sure yet," Evelyn admitted, "but it looks like a signal from Mars." There was a longer pause this time, followed by a low whistle. "I'll be there in 10, Harris said, his voice now filled with excitement. As they waited for Harris to arrive, Evelyn and Whitaker continued to analyze the signal, their minds working in tandem to unravel its secrets. The more they studied it, the more convinced they became that it was indeed a message. The repeating sequence was too precise, too deliberate to be a coincidence. But what did it mean? And who, or what, had sent it? When Harris finally arrived, he immediately set to work, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he ran the signal through a series of advanced algorithms. The room was silent, except for the hum of the computers and the occasional beep of the equipment. The tension was palpable, a tangible force that seemed to press in on them from all sides. Hours passed, the three of them working tirelessly, their exhaustion forgotten in the face of the mystery before them. And then, finally, Harris let out a triumphant shout. "I've got something!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement. Evelyn and Whitaker rushed to his side, their eyes fixed on the screen. There, displayed in stark black and white, was a series of mathematical sequences. Numbers and symbols that seemed to form a coherent pattern. It was a code, a language unlike anything they had ever seen. "What does it mean?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Harris shook his head, his eyes wide with wonder. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted, "but it's definitely a message, and it's meant for us." The three of them stared at the screen, their minds racing with possibilities. The signal from Mars was real, and it was intelligent, but what did it want? And what would happen now that they had found it? As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Evelyn felt a surge of excitement and fear. This was just the beginning, she realized. The signal was a key, a doorway to something far greater than they could imagine. And she knew, with a certainty that filled her with both dread and exhilaration, that their lives would never be the same again. The Martian landscape stretched out before them, a desolate expanse of red dust and jagged rock formations that seemed to go on forever. The sky above was a pale pink, tinged with the faint glow of the distant sun. Commander Alexei Volkov stood at the edge of the landing site, his boots sinking slightly into the fine, powdery soil. He adjusted the visor of his helmet, shielding his eyes from the glare, and took a deep breath. The air inside his suit was cool and sterile, a stark contrast to the harsh environment outside. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him, a heavy burden that he carried with every step. Behind him, the rest of the crew was busy unloading equipment from the lander, their movements slow and deliberate in the low gravity. Dr. Priya Mehta was among them, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had spent years studying Mars from afar, analyzing data and images sent back by rovers and satellites, but nothing could have prepared her for this. The sheer vastness of the planet, the eerie silence that seemed to echo in her ears. She felt a thrill of anticipation as she thought about what lay ahead. The signal had led them here, to this specific coordinates, and she was determined to uncover its secrets. "Commander," she said, her voice crackling over the comms, "the geological scans are complete. The underground structures are approximately 2 kilometers to the northeast, buried beneath a layer of rock and sediment." Volkov nodded, his expression grim. "Let's move out," he ordered, his voice firm and commanding. "Stay close and keep your eyes open. We don't know what we're dealing with here." The team set off in single file, their boots crunching against the rocky terrain. The landscape was eerily silent, the only sound the faint hum of their suits' life support systems. As they approached the coordinates, the ground began to slope downward, forming a shallow depression that seemed to stretch on for miles. The geological scans had indicated that the structures were buried deep beneath the surface, hidden from view by layers of rock and dust. But as they drew closer, they began to notice subtle signs of something unusual, strange formations in the rock, patterns that seemed too regular to be natural. Priya knelt down, brushing away a layer of dust to reveal a smooth metallic surface beneath. Her breath caught in her throat as she ran her gloved hand over the material. It was cool to the touch and perfectly smooth, unlike anything she had ever seen on Mars before. "Commander," she said, her voice trembling with excitement, "you need to see this." Volkov and the rest of the team gathered around, their eyes wide with wonder. The metallic surface extended for several meters, disappearing into the ground. It was clear that this was no natural formation, it was man-made, or rather, something made. The implications were staggering. They had found evidence of an ancient civilization, one that had once thrived on this barren planet. "Let's dig," Volkov said, his voice filled with determination. "We need to see what's down there." The team worked tirelessly, using drills and excavation tools to carefully remove the layers of rock and dust. As they dug deeper, more of the structure began to emerge, a series of interconnected tunnels and chambers, all made from the same smooth metallic material. The air inside was stale and cold but breathable thanks to the suit's life support systems. The walls were covered in strange symbols and markings, etched into the metal with precision and care. It was clear that this was no ordinary structure. It was a colony, a hidden city buried beneath the surface of Mars. Priya felt a surge of excitement as she examined the symbols, her mind racing with possibilities. "These markings," she said, her voice filled with awe. "They're a form of writing, a language." Volkov nodded, his expression grim. "We need to document everything," he said, "every symbol, every detail. This could be the key to understanding who built this place and why." As they explored further, they began to uncover more evidence of the colony's inhabitants. There were artifacts scattered throughout the tunnels, tools, clothing, and even what appeared to be fragments of machinery. The technology was advanced, far beyond anything humanity had ever developed. It was clear that the civilization that had built this place had been highly intelligent, with a deep understanding of science and engineering. But as they delved deeper into the colony, they began to notice something else, something that sent a chill down their spines. The tunnels were filled with a sense of abandonment, a haunting emptiness that seemed to echo through the corridors. There were no signs of life, no remains of the inhabitants. It was as if they had simply vanished, leaving behind only their creations. Priya felt a pang of sadness as she examined a small, intricately carved figurine. It was a representation of a humanoid figure with elongated limbs and a serene expression. She wondered what had happened to the people who had once called this place home. Had they been wiped out by some catastrophic event? Or had they simply moved on, leaving Mars behind in search of new horizons? As they reached the heart of the colony, they found themselves standing in a large, circular chamber. The walls were covered in more symbols, arranged in a spiral pattern that seemed to draw the eye toward the center of the room. In the middle of the chamber was a pedestal, on top of which rested a small metallic object. It was roughly the size of a human hand, and covered in intricate carvings that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Priya approached the pedestal cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out and gently picked up the object, feeling a strange warmth emanating from it. As she turned it over in her hands, she noticed a small indentation on one side, shaped like a button. Without thinking, she pressed it. The room was suddenly filled with a blinding light and a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. The symbols on the walls began to glow, their patterns shifting and changing as if they were alive. Priya felt a surge of energy course through her body, a sensation that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She realized with a sudden clarity that she was holding a key to something far greater than she could have ever imagined. The light faded and the hum subsided, leaving the room in silence once more. But something had changed. The symbols on the walls were now arranged in a new pattern, one that seemed to form a map. Priya's eyes widened as she realized what she was looking at. It was a star chart showing the location of other colonies scattered across the galaxy. Volkov stepped forward, his expression filled with awe. This changes everything," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "We're not alone. We were never alone." Priya nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. The signal from Mars had led them here, to this hidden colony. But now they had found something even greater, a map to other worlds, other civilizations. The journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. As they made their way back to the surface, Priya couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The discovery of the colony had opened up a new chapter in human history, one filled with endless possibilities. The universe was vast and filled with mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and now, thanks to the signal from Mars, they had a guide, a map to the stars. But as they stepped out into the harsh Martian sunlight, Priya couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The sense of abandonment in the colony had been replaced by something else. A presence, faint but unmistakable. She glanced back at the entrance to the tunnels, her heart pounding in her chest. The signal had been a message, a call to action, and now they had answered it. The journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun.